If you sell a house these days, the buyer might be a pension fund.
For those that haven't remembered, we talked about BlackRock. They're the company that now essentially is in control of the Treasury, right? They're basically, at this point, it seems like they're in control of our financial direction of this country. Both the Fed and the Treasury, it would seem. And it was decided by the Trump administration, put in place because of the crimes, right? That's the argument. Well, because of all the issues and because of our financial despair and all the blah, 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 blah. But we were at the best we ever were before this, according to Trump. Okay, but then suddenly we need BlackRock. But that's not the truth, because we weren't the best we were. This country was very clearly struggling, despite all of Trump's, it's not just Obama, Bush, they all do it. They always lie about how good we're doing and the jobs numbers. They always lie. The last one was a best example. But the argument is that BlackRock needed to take control of this. BlackRock, which, by the way, is an overtly Israeli company that adds to the growing list of overtly Israeli anythings that are controlling any number of things about this country. It says, there's no doubt that Donald Trump believes in BlackRock. The real estate magnate and his presidential candidate made his biggest securities bet in one of them, despite his warnings of Carl Icahn, the activist investor he described as a friend. It says, and once like to appoint as Treasury Secretary, Trump, the Republican frontrunner, has $25 million to $50 million in the New York City investment giant BlackRock's Obsidian Fund. So Donald Trump had $25 to $50 million invested in BlackRock's Obsidian Fund. Now, I would say right off the bat that that's an obvious conflict of interest, an obvious profit motive. Now, but first of all, we want to take a quick look at Obsidian Fund and see what that is, the details. There's a link right there, right? Let's take a look and see what that actually is. And oh, whoops, it takes you to this really weird page. Terms and conditions with some legalese discussion about access. It says access subject to legal description. Okay, and you have to actually click confirm to go through to this page. It's supposed to just be the BlackRock website, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Well, I had to click it because I wanted to see what this data was. And guess what? Page unavailable. So not only did I agree to whatever they made me agree to, but the data's not even there. Or maybe because I agreed, the data's now not there. Either way, the Obsidian details about Trump, the deal that Trump was involved with BlackRock, seems to be missing. Now, I'm sure you could probably find it somewhere. But interesting that BlackRock, of all groups, the very site and group on which it was working with, the deal with who later became the president, is suddenly not there. But I think what's interesting here, guys, is to realize that Donald Trump has had money invested with BlackRock before he became president. Now, remember that BlackRock hit their $6 trillion asset, which is now $7 trillion today. This was in 2018 because of Trump's tax law. So we can very clearly see potential for little quid pro quo. But now it becomes even more interesting to understand what exactly BlackRock is and why this is something we all need to be very, very concerned about. My opinion, this is a takeover. This is a takeover by BlackRock of the world, if you will.
BlackRock is buying every single family house they can find, paying 20 to 50% above asking price and outbidding normal home buyers. So why are corporations, pension funds, and property investment groups buying entire neighborhoods out from under the middle class? Homes are popping up on the MLS and going under contract within a few hours. BlackRock, among others, are buying up thousands of new homes and entire neighborhoods. So who is BlackRock? Only the world's largest asset manager and the leading proponent of the Great Reset. They're looking to redistribute, get this, $120 trillion, the entire wealth of the world's middle class and poor combined several times over. As an example, a 124 new home neighborhood was bought in its entirety in Texas. Average Americans were outbid to a tune of $32 million. Homes sold at an average of 20% above listing. Now the entire neighborhood is made up of SFRs. What are SFRs? Single family rentals. Now your potential lower to middle class homeowner is positioned to be a permanent renter. This is wealth redistribution, and it ain't rich people's wealth that's getting redistributed. It's normal American middle class. Yeah, salt of the earth wealth heading into the hands of the world's most powerful entities and individuals. The traditional financial vehicle gone forever. Home equity is the main financial element that middle class families use to build wealth. And BlackRock, a Federal Reserve funded financial institution, is buying up all the houses to make sure that young families cannot build wealth. That's right, Federal Reserve funded financial institute. Let that sink in for a minute. You got it? They're using your tax dollars to screw over the lower and middle class, and it's permanent. Not one presidential administration of BS. This is a fundamental reorganization of society. So where does this position the average American in 30 years when it's a given that every new neighborhood is to be bought up whole so they can be utilized as SFRs? It positions them as peasants. In the US and other nations, homeownership is often the first and most vital step. This can provide for generational wealth and success, but as permanent guaranteed renters, you're pissing away a lifetime of equity and the chance for mobility. You just become a peasant. The Great Reset is real. It's happening. This will be the greatest transfer of wealth and the greatest consolidation of power in the history of mankind. If they get away with it, revolution will be the only cure. It will be awful. Wake up, get active, stop this now. This is warfare, make no doubt about it. Lloyds Bank in London is doing it, as is every great financial institute across the world. This must be stopped. It's a greater threat than the slow creep of communism, BLM, or anything else you can think of combined. It's a death stroke. I'm over here paying attention to the economy, to the real estate market, to lumber prices. Everything about this is terrible. It's orchestrated. It's the greatest transfer of wealth in history. It's the demolition of the economy within the last year or so. History has always detailed accounts of serfdom and feudalism, but at least at the end of the day, after you paid your share to the king, your family, when you died, inherited the family farm, but now you don't get anything. You're getting nothing. You'll own nothing and be happy. That's what they tell us. And all while Bill Gates is buying up all the farmland and BlackRock is buying up your neighborhoods and charging you rent to live in these cracker boxes. I guess we're all just going to live in these cracker boxes and pay like $1,500 in rent and then go work at the only place in town because small businesses are just donezo after this past year. We're all going to either go work at maybe McDonald's. Actually, no, not McDonald's, because they're going to have robots to take care of that. Will we go work at the Amazon factories? Maybe some of us can be drivers and get that crucial vitamin D, but they'll probably replace us with drones soon.
BlackRock, listed twice, in fact, on this top holders of stocks investments in 3M, which makes masks, right? We just talked about this. What is the one thing that seems to be the primary focus that it guarantee is making so much money they can't even see right now? That is in regard to masks. Everyone needs them. Everyone's buying them everywhere. They're making new versions of it. There's new kinds. There's new styles. There's new pictures on them. This is a booming industry all of a sudden, right? It begins to look like this could have been at least one of the things that happened underneath all of what was going on. We just saw the essential takeover of our country. But all we can point to is China and Russia, as usual. The mainstream financial press has been remarkably quiet about the Federal Reserve's appointment, this was on March 24th, of BlackRock to manage its massive corporate debt purchase program in response to the COVID crisis. Now, right off the bat, guys, realize the Federal Reserve is a private company. It is not a government institution. Think about, the very the fact that they even have federal in their name is meant to confuse you. This was a organized deception. It is a private banking institute. Think of the Federal Reserve as essentially like the bank for the U.S. Treasury, right? Okay, so now this Federal Reserve is appointing somebody who now has control over the debt purchase program for the Treasury. So you now have a private company appointing somebody that has influence and overt control over the government's assets. And this is the point of having the private company pretending to be a government agency. We are being sold out. You as an American are being sold out. Don't you think that we should vote or at least be told when something like this happens? I mean, I sure as hell was screaming about it, and I have been since. Where was the mainstream media, right? They've been remarkably quiet about it. I wonder why. This is easily the most important financial move that's pretty much ever happened in this country. But they don't care about it because all they can do is get you worked up about race, right? BlackRock CEO Larry Fink may now be the most powerful man in the world, overseeing not just the Fed's new potentially $4.5 trillion corporate slush fund, but also managing $27 trillion. $27 trillion of the global economy, even before the appointment in March. So imagine adding on all of the U.S. Treasury's assets would do. As the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock already was managing $7 trillion for its global corporate investor clients, along with another $20 trillion for assets through its financial risk monitoring software. Imagine the power that comes along with that. As Andrew Gavin Marshall explained, unlike a bank, asset management firms do not manage and invest their own money, but do so on behalf of their many clients. So that translates, guys, you. But see, you didn't choose them. Your government did, but they're still using your money that the government pretends is theirs. In the case of BlackRock, those clients come in the form of banks, corporations, insurance companies, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, central banks, and foundations. Basically, like it said, this is them using, through the Fed, the assets of the Treasury. With $27 trillion under various forms of of its management, BlackRock towers over the finance, insurance, and real estate sectors. This much consolidated financial power may be it is unprecedented. This company now has control over the U.S. Treasury. As it says here, Rolling Stone's Matt Taibbi, he's done excellent work in regard to 2008. He called out this new bailout of Wall Street a bailout of the last bailout in 2008. Think about that. Basically meaning that they never even tried to stop what happened in 2008. They just, or even before or after, as I've been screaming about every single moment up until now. Everything they did to create 2008 didn't even slow down. It just kept getting worse, even right after it stopped. They were 10 times worse right before this started. Because they clearly knew they had something. Hey, virus, take all their money. And you paid for it again. The question is, when are Americans going to wake the hell up? When are we going to realize that we're just the tools that are being used by these globalist financial elites that are stealing everything from you every chance they get with zero repercussions? Less well known is that the 2008 Wall Street bailout was itself a bailout of an earlier 2001 Wall Street bailout, in which the Fed pumped more than $100 billion into the struggling financial sector, wounded by the dot-com bust over and over and over. And guess what? Under the cover of the 9/11 crisis. Oh, big surprise. Sort of like it's happening now. So under 9/11, they hide a bailout, and now they hide another bailout under that. I mean, guys, it is so apparent. The only block is just you choosing to accept the reality. I know it's not fun to look at, but this is where we are. And that calls out the Obamas, the Trumps, the Pelosi's, the Bidens. It calls out all of them because they're all part of it. Now, I personally feel it's clear that Trump has a huger part of this because he's the president that allowed this to happen. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's personally involved. I do think so based on the data. I mean, it's hard to miss the fact that he's personally invested in this company and that suddenly their data about it's missing. And that his tax law is the very thing that gave BlackRock its surge, right? I mean, it's hard to miss. Use 9/11 to cover one up. They're using coronavirus to cover this one up. It says, and this is really interesting. Some attention has lately been paid to the fact that during the 2008 bailout, guess what? BlackRock's Larry Fink played a major role in advising governments and corporations in how to deal with toxic assets from crashing banks. And we talked about this already. They were involved before. They were involved in 2007. So yet again, we have BlackRock being kind of a common denominator in the crises that happen in this country. A company, private company that is taking control of the Treasury and Fed in this country. That should suddenly become a little bit more interesting. Remember that? And the Fed, right, Trump? And the Fed, right? Well, now the Fed says the full range of tools in play to counter the pandemic. Well, what do you know? It comes full circle. That might as well be BlackRock saying, hey, we're going to start using your money to do what we want under the guise of countering the pandemic. Because remember, they're in control now. Shh. Don't tell anybody.